Hi, it's Louisa Dahl. And welcome to the Interactive Minds podcast, where I talk with passionate marketers, innovators, and digital leaders about their specific recipes for success. In today's show, I had a fun conversation with Dylan Malloch, talking about everything from conflicting career advice and prioritising tasks to how you can build credibility with awards. Here's 3 things you're going to learn. 1, 3 steps to build the credibility you need to be a disruptor. 2, how awards can be leveraged by your organisation and your customers. And 3, the first step to get clarity on before entering an award. Let's get into it. Today I'm with Dylan Malloch, who is the Director of Marketing and Communications at St Paul's School. I met Dylan when he spoke for us recently at an Interactive Minds event. Welcome to the show, Dylan.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
Yes. Now, you recently spoke earlier this year on the topic of marketing plans and their secret sauce. My memory is not that good. I did have to look it up because after running these events for over a decade now, I have to admit they do blend a little bit. But I know I was super impressed by your presentation and your approach. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today and to delve in a bit around what you do. So tell us, to start off with, you've been in marketing for about 12 years. Can you give us a brief summary of your career over this period?
Yeah, sure. It's actually a little bit longer than that, and my grey hair's a good evidence of that actually as well. So
Excellent.
I'm originally from Canberra, and I started out in event management, and then I did what lots of people who grew up in Canberra decide to do. They leave.
Yep.
So I went north to Brisbane for a little while, working for a property consultancy in their marketing team. And I got moved to Sydney through that role. So suddenly I was down in Sydney. And I was sort of searching for a bit of meaning in that. And the work was interesting, but not particularly fulfilling. And so from there, I found a job at a PR consultancy called Cefiati Communications Group. And it felt like coming home. It was just an excellent place. And the consulting life was definitely for me. I loved the thrill of working on multiple clients from multiple sectors all at the same time, working from a communication strategy, media strategy. Social media was very much in its infancy when I began, but it was all the rage when I finished.
Yeah.
And so that was a really great time of life working as a PR consultant in Sydney. But then I hit an interesting phase of life where I felt I needed to move back to Brisbane.
Yep.
And so the move I did. And Cefiati, they were wonderfully accommodating. They moved me up here, actually, and I was their Brisbane office director for a little while until the local church I go to, I met the headmaster of a local school, and we got talking, and this school sounded incredible. They were doing some fabulously innovative work. The problem was nobody knew about it. So I guess he poached me because he sold me on the vision. And so I now work for a school called St Paul's School up here in Brisbane as their Director of Marketing and Communications. And it's all very interesting.
Cool. That's a good story. I was wondering how you were going to end that there, making the jump from PR consultant to working at St Paul's. So that's really interesting to hear.
It's an interesting one because I got conflicting career advice actually when I was debating the move. Because working in a consultancy, you got exposure to so many different sectors and executives and thinking lots of different ways that there was some concern from a few people that if I was going to go one in-house and then work for a school, was that actually compromising my career? Was it a step back? But I actually feel it's been something that's really enhanced my career because it's given me the opportunity to take a senior leadership role. So it's essentially a deputy headmaster equivalent role at St Paul's where I can affect the strategic direction of the school and have a lot of say into that, but also managing a larger team now. And I'll tell you what, the clientele, I guess you could say, at an elite school very much reflects those people I was working with in consultancy life. So you encounter some fascinating people from all sorts of sectors. You'll be talking to a pilot from Qantas in one breath, to the head of a small construction company in the next, to a partner at a big four after that. It's really actually quite interesting, and it's given me a chance to really sharpen my skill set in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I like what you say there about, how you did have conflicting career advice, because I think that happens to everyone at some point, and it's something that we probably don't talk enough about when we're looking at all these options, because I think, it's easy to play it safe sometimes and to take the that advice not to maybe make a change or take a risk on something that is new. But you've obviously done it and are here to tell the tale. So that's great.
A little bit. It's good to... I'd like this to be one of those happy stories, one of those, I took the job and then it turned out awfully and I wish, why did I leave? But actually it's turned out really well. And I'm really enjoying the environment I get to work in. So I find it quite fulfilling, actually, by being able to sell and influence the vision of a school that is helping the next generation of humanity enter the workforce and enter life. So you get to have an incredible impact on young people's lives, while also getting, I suppose, the professional fulfillment of an executive role and a corporate gig. So I really quite enjoy it, actually. It's quite good. I also work really close to home, so that's even better. So
small commute.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
It's quite good.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about your current role. What does that involve? What's the broader team look like? And what kind of things do you work on?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and explain it while drawing parallels to as many corporates as I can, because I don't imagine too many of the listeners are school listeners.
Yeah.
But essentially, as the director of marketing and communications, I identify the strategy. So there's a sort of a four-prong method to my madness here. One is evaluating the market, and private schools have been notoriously poor at evaluating the market which they operate. They've taken the perception that we're a service, or a school is a service that everybody wants, therefore we just need to exist. And so it's sort of the problem a lot of companies have got themselves into over the past 25 years, given there's been such strong economic growth. They've only developed supply side strategies. They've never thought about how do we develop a demand side strategy. And schools have been very bad at that traditionally. So that was the first part, evaluating the market. What does that say about our brand identity, our product offering, price points, our services? The phrase I'll often use around here is, are we delivering what we say on the tin? And what do we actually say on the tin? What are people buying from the school these days? So first the market strategy, then I guess the business plan. So how does the school actually operate within the market? And then from there, the marketing strategy. So what does the strategy to achieve the business plan need to look like? And under that, then setting the tactics of what are the specific things we need to do. And that's getting very practical into where do we run our ads, how do we design our spending patterns and our marketing plan and that sort of thing. So I've got an interesting team under me here, which is I restructured very early when I came in, because apparently that's what you're almost required to do when you become a marketing director, is you change your consultancies and restructure. So it's no different in a school. So I've got a marketing assistant who actually, I'll tell a story about that if it comes up a little bit later, but she's still at university. I had all these university graduates apply for the job, but she was by far the best, even though she hadn't got a degree, which is a whole other subject in education.
Yes.
And then there's the school's registrar and an assistant registrar. So it's a very traditional role, but I've tried to reshape it to have a focus on, I guess, mapping the customer journey and sort of thinking if somebody inquires of the school, where do they drop off their enrollment journey and how can we better address those parts? Because every school's enrollment journey basically looks the same, but does it need to look the same? Well, probably not. So yeah, there's those aspects. Even the receptionists were reporting to me because they're the first point of client contact and control. And then trying a few other people sit kind of diagonally report to me, I guess, because in schools there's a lot of great education, but not necessarily a lot of good of, I guess, business operations, general management, I guess you would call it. So while at the moment I'm undertaking a communications review, I'm also doing a data management project, which isn't really anything to do with marketing, but having the mindset of someone who's worked in the corporate sector, I'm able to influence there. So, so a bit long-winded, but it's quite a broad canvas which you get to paint on here in school.
Yeah, and it's exciting to think that you do have that control and visibility across all the different touch points as well, not just some
and you get to be
channels.
you get to be a disruptor as well, which I sort of encourage a lot of listeners to think about how you can undertake that as part of your role, because there'll be a number of times when I'm sitting around I guess you call it the executive leadership table, where all the conversation is happening in a particular way, but because I've got a different background, and that's not to say that their perspective is bad, but it is very similar, and you might almost say narrow at times, because it's a lot of educators talking about education, where suddenly someone can come in and go, well, actually, have you thought it this way? And you tend to get the answer of, well, we don't do that because we're a school, and no one's ever bothered to think about, well, does a school need to do that? Why can't we learn from what people are doing in the corporate sector, from all these other things, where my consulting background is actually really good, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's great that you're able to play that role. But I imagine that in, somewhat a traditional institution, that being a disruptor may not always be well received.
It's not always safe, I guess, is the way you could put it.
Yeah.
So you need to build a bit of credibility first, so people will actually listen to you, and that probably more at home in a podcast on leadership. But how can you best build influence in the team that you're leading and the colleagues who have a lot more industry experience among you? And that was something I challenged myself on, as I wanted to set myself a goal that within 6 months, if I was talking to a teacher and they didn't know anything about me, would they think I was a teacher? Because we had to do that at my last consulting job too. If I was to suddenly, for example, meet a partner of an insolvency organization or a partner of a workplace law firm, they don't want to spend they're on billable hours, they're on valuable time. They want to spend their time briefing me on what workplace law is. They want to know that the person they're speaking to knows, obviously not as much as they do, but can, talk the talk.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess that's a credibility challenge that people need to go through when they're taking a new role or going into a new organization or consulting to a new sector, is if somebody didn't know you from a bar of soap, could they think that you do that? And so I was talking to someone earlier this year, and they said, so how long have you been a teacher? And I just gave a little fist pump and went, yes.
I've made it.
Because I'm not.
So how did you, I'm curious, I know we didn't necessarily intend to delve into this, but I'm curious around what kind of things can you do or have you done to establish that credibility and influence in an industry where you don't have the background?
Yeah, there's probably 3 things I'd recommend. One is to park your ego at the door. I don't know if that's easy or difficult for me, because no one's ever told me how big an ego I've got. I've probably got an enormous one, but I'd like to think I don't. But the ability to, you often feel, particularly if you're new to a senior leadership role, that you have to know all the answers. You have to get quick wins. You have to sit in there, and if people ask you a question and you don't have the answer, well, then you're just a fraud. But I challenge that. I think people are willing to give you a bit of the benefit of the doubt if the quality of your questions are both genuine and have a bit of integrity behind them.
Yeah.
So I could happily sit in a meeting of educators and they would use some weird acronym, and I'd just say, look, I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I have no idea. And one, it helps build the career because they feel good because someone wants them to explain their, expertise to someone, and people like having to do that. But second, it gives you time to figure out where you are, what you're actually going to talk about. So one is, don't be afraid if you don't know anything, and learn to ask a better question. The second is, ask for things that you can read or videos you can watch, because there's so many resources out there. If you leave it to yourself to do the research on, say, I'm going to research property investment, I'll tell you what, there's no sort of podcasts and videos and webinars that you can hop on to learn about, and books to read on property investing. But if you ask someone who you trust to point you in the right direction of the best books they know on it, or the best podcasts. And so that was something that I asked the headmaster to invest in me. Like, he sold me on his vision of what an education worth having should really look like.
Yeah.
So I let him go, and these books, some of them were fantastic. So there's a gentleman from Harvard talking about the future of entrepreneurship in education.
Great.
And that's how we managed to build our brand. That actually influenced my marketing strategy here.
Awesome.
Fantastically. And the third is it's an old client of mine used to call it, he called it management by walking the floors. It's easy to get caught up in your own sort of area or your own team, but exposure to everything else that's happening around your organization is a really good thing. So how, let's say you work for I'll just say it for an advertising firm, and you're in a particular graphic design section. How long do you spend hanging out with the copywriting people? How long do you spend with the social media strategy folks? How long do you spend at different ways asking them how they do their job?
Yeah.
Because that will help you do your job and also help you get a more holistic understanding of the sector you're meant to be consulting to. So, yeah, they're probably the three things. Leave your ego at the door, get good advice about reading better materials, and walk the floors with intent, I guess.
Fantastic. I love that you just came up with that on the spot. That's awesome.
That's why I'm in marketing.
That's it, exactly. Yeah. Excellent. Well, look, it sounds like you have a really interesting role and that you're covering a wide range of things. One of the things I know that you're leveraging is applying for and winning awards, and we are going to talk a little bit about this further. So I'd love to hear, first of all, kind of where this idea came from as using awards as a marketing tool or marketing kind of influence, I suppose, and what you've done with it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I can give you a bad example first. So this goes back to my consulting days of why you've got to be strategic when you're even thinking about awards or indeed any kind of recognition that you might want to be leveraging as an organization. So I was consulting to a fairly large financial services organization, and we got the call from their marketing department saying, hey, Dylan, we've got a great idea. We're going to give $1 million to this charity. And I thought, well, that's exceedingly lovely of you. Well done. That's great. Why are you talking to me about it? And they said, well, because we want to get some PR out of it. Can you get us some media coverage? And like I felt they'd really put the $1 million cart before the horse, because I was thinking, like, how does this charity in any way relate to what you're wanting your brand to be? Like, what's the big appeal about doing this? Are you just wanting a journalist to come over and say, wow, isn't this, financial services organization amazing because they've given this money to this place? And nobody is going to, no self-respecting journalist is going to write that story. No. So they'd kind of gone towards the recognition without asking, why is this going to add any value to us? In the end, they probably, it's great to donate $1 million, but who are you giving to? Is there any, if you're going to want recognition for something good that you've done or achieved, you can actually think it through. And so this one that I'm going to talk about was obviously quite relevant to us. It was the inaugural, this year it was the second ever National Education Awards, and St. Paul's entered, and we won 2 particular awards because I thought we're trying to establish credibility at a high price point here. So it's the same reason you'd walk past the $2 shop and go spend money at a better clothing shop, for example, is because you trust the capabilities of it, you like the feel of it, gives you credibility that maybe that you're wearing a nice outfit. So how could we demonstrate to our clients, but also the potential clients, that we're worth the investment, that we're worth spending what our fees are? And so we ended up entering and winning both Junior School of the Year as well as the Australian School of the Year, which were fantastic achievements. And they were really good because this is getting a little bit callous, and so I hope there's not too many St. Paul's parents listening to this, but it's easier to keep people once they've come to your school than get them in later. So the fact that we won Junior School of the Year is great, because that means that people will come earlier and hopefully stay till the end of secondary school. But the School of the Year also shows that we're at the peak and one of the top schools in the country. And so that lends us credibility that when we say something, people should listen, and that if you were to trust your most valuable possession, the most valuable thing, your children, to our care, they're in safe hands. And so that was the rationale about why we targeted these particular awards. But then we were left with the challenge of, well, great, you won them. What now?
Yeah, definitely. How do you leverage it?
Yeah, that's right. So I guess the thing that I'd counsel first, if people are thinking about entering awards, and I know that from particularly people who've come to Interactive Minds events. There's a lot of real estate companies there. There's a lot of digital firms. And there's a lot of awards that people can enter in that space.
Yeah.
I guess you've got to be really careful about, what awards do you actually want to go for? So, for example, I'm thinking now, do we actually enter the education awards next year? Because there's more pressure entering them than not entering them now, because we're sort of, for want of a better phrase, the defending champions of School of the Year.
Right.
Is there more to lose if we don't win it again than by going for it? But do we instead want to pivot and look somewhere else? Could the St. Paul School enter National Innovation Awards and National Entrepreneurship Awards? That certainly helps our brand, but also gives us credibility in different areas. So I guess that's the first thing is why are you entering the awards? Is it for your own self-gratification, or is it that it's actually going to add value to your brand? And then I guess, how do you leverage it? You've really got to think about, are you just looking for a pat on the back, or can you use it in a way that it makes your clients feel safer about their investment?
Yeah.
So for example, we thought really carefully about when we are announcing that we won this award, particularly on something like social media, like which picture do you use? Because there's millions that you can use on that. What strategically is going to go? If we want parents to feel like it's not just the school's award, but it's their award, like they have a part of it, so much so that they want to tell their friends that they send their children to the Australian School of the Year. How do we help them feel like it's their pride? So, for example,
love it.
If you're an advertising company and you say, yeah, we won Best Small Agency of the Year, how do you make it so that your clients want to tell all their clients that they're actually, using this crowd to do their advertising? So it's quite interesting. That. So there were a couple of things. Do we pick a family to put on there? Because that's something that maybe that makes the parents feel like it's ownership. But then you have the risk of singling out one family at the expense of the others. We thought, well, do we just put the awards themselves? But that probably wasn't going to get it done, because that feels a little bit removed. And so what we did is we actually looked to the analytics of what our best performing advertising is. And I don't want to sort of say too much in case other schools are listening to this, but we took all the same dimensions of what those photos would look like and replicated on this. And the phrasing of what we did is help us share in our success. We're all part of this together. It wasn't a how good are we, look at us. It was we're all on this journey and you've all made this possible. So well done, students, parents, and teachers. And very deliberate in that order. And it, my gosh, went like wildfire. It was just brilliant because parents felt ownership of the award. They felt that it wasn't the school that had won it. They felt they'd contributed to it. So the number of parents that now say, oh, isn't it great? We send our kids to this school. So because then it helps feel like they're big noting themselves a little bit like that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess, and that's come across then in some of our other metrics, like a net promoter score. Like, why do you choose the high score? They say, because we feel that we've been a part of the school's success. So yeah, that's been really, really good. So from a social media perspective anyway, which we found is the best way to communicate with parents if you want them to share your success.
Yes.
That's worked really, really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that you've taken the time to think that through as well, because I think, a lot of the time when we see awards being announced, it's actually, on social media at the award night and it's some photo of maybe a couple of people on stage that you can't really make out. Whereas it sounds like you've really deliberately focused in on what is going to work in spreading this word and how you can encourage and engage the other people in the community involved to leverage it to its full extent. So I really like that you've taken the time to, think beyond getting the award to how it can then be leveraged.
Yeah, I guess it's worth thinking strategically about every aspect of what you are doing. Like there's no such thing or there's no value in an ad or a post or an award just for the sake of the award. Like if you can't get lasting value out of it and ongoing value. So, for example, we could have just left it at that and it's a flash in the pan. But how do we make sure that parents are still talking about this 6 months down the track? How do we keep giving them something to think about? So off the back of an award win, do you try and unpack it a bit? So we're about to launch a 4-part blog series that unpacks the reasons for why we were named School of the Year, or have got some of these other awards that are really aimed at that help me live my life sort of thing. So
Yeah.
we were recognized as an innovative organization. Here's one thing, and here's how you can be enabling your children in this way through discussions around the kitchen table, through things you can do on your drive to school. So all of a sudden, parents are wanting to read those blogs because it's helping them live their life. But second, it's reinforcing the award win and then putting it fresh in their mind so they'll hopefully tell others about it again. So it's almost like a 12-month strategic cycle that you come up based on a single award night. Because you're right, a lot of people will just do the grainy photo or the LinkedIn post celebrating their success and, put a logo on their website, and that's kind of it. Maybe they'll put it on their email signature as well.
Yeah, that's right. And yet, I imagine there's a fair bit of work that goes into entering these awards in the first place.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think each entry ended up being about 8,000 words.
Wow.
And we entered quite a few. So I don't think I've written that much since I was in school, actually. But it's sort of, I think what helps is if you believe in what you're doing. So if you've got a kind of circumspect or negative attitude to the company you're working for or the client whom you're doing work for, that's going to compromise everything. And I think that's something, and I hope it's coming through in the podcast, is that I'm really proud of my school. I'm really proud of the place that I'm working. And I believe that we really do deliver a great education.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't, and as marketers, if you don't enjoy the food you're eating, how are you going to convince others to eat it?
Definitely.
So if you aren't on board with that, and I guess that would apply across every industry imaginable. If you think you are a crummy real estate agency, then how is your marketing's going to suffer because of that?
Yeah, that's right. Definitely have to believe in what you're doing. It's part of the job, isn't it, to make sure that aligns.
But I think there's also unintended things, sort of little gremlins that can come out. So, for example, what's the award win going to do to your internal audience? So your colleagues, in this way, your teachers. And something that we had to be cognizant of is that we're not the most expensive school, we're not the most famous school, but if we were in School of the Year, the natural question people might come up with is, well, what about, the $50,000 a year schools in Sydney? Why didn't they win this? So you have to be prepared for a little bit of not negativity, but skepticism from people, especially if there are some staff who are slightly disengaged.
Yes.
So if you've won Marketing Agency of the Year, that could all be undone by the one unhappy consultant who sees the LinkedIn post and shares it on their own Facebook page or something, going, can't believe this shoddy award got given to this terrible agency kind of thing. Suddenly you've got an internal crisis on your hand. So I guess it's not just bringing your customers along on the journey, but bringing your internal audience. And as marketing directors or leaders or even middle management, how are you influencing those around you that this really is a cause worth celebrating and you are a place worth working for?
And do you communicate the award entries, for example, to the broader team and staff prior? Or how do you kind of prepare?
Not until there's something to talk about. So, for example, I put in 7 entries the first year, and we got we made the finals list. Spit that out.
Yep.
For 5 categories.
Great.
When we were advising people, I didn't say that we also entered these other 2, but my entries weren't good enough to make it into the final.
Sure. Yes.
That's, I do have some ego, I suppose. But it's how you communicate that to them. Is it isn't this great? We're all brilliant, or is it more of a the way I crafted the announcement? So I've gotten to know the headmaster's voice quite well, so I can write quite well in his style.
Yes.
Which is an important thing to learn. Thinking about, okay, let's start by setting the scene first, thanking everybody for their work to where we are so far. So they're immediately engaged, feeling appreciated. Then acknowledging that it hasn't all been smooth sailing in certain ways, so making them feel listened to.
Yep.
So if people have had complaints, they've been heard on those complaints. Then saying, but this is the culmination of your excellent work. So again, making it all about them.
Yep.
So by the end of it, they're feeling celebrated, listened to, and acknowledged. And so if you can get people to, and that, that's not just in business, that's in life, really,
definitely.
isn't it? If you're speaking to family or friends or anyone, you want people to feel respected. You want them to feel like they've been listened to, feel appreciated, but also excited. So that's, a very careful and strategic way of even announcing that you've made a final for something, let alone won the damn thing.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and I guess that goes to that point of like why are you doing what you're doing? Is it worth it at all? Because you can spend a lot of time going down these paths, but if it's not going to actually get you anything, what's the point?
Yeah, for sure. And you've spent obviously quite a bit of time in crafting these applications, or so is that right? The word maybe?
Applications is probably the right way, or entries.
Yes. So you've spent the time doing that. Have there been any things that you've learned along the way that have helped you to be more successful with the entries versus when you started out?
Probably not in terms of how to be more successful than recently, but the thing that I learned very quickly is that you need to be able to, one, talk the talk in the jargon, but B, sell the story without the jargon. So you need to be able to translate, essentially.
Yes.
So, for example, it was something I really got a lot better at when I started working in a consultancy. I was very poor, but by the end I improved. Was taking very complicated tax legislation and turning it into a story that might be applicable to run on news.com.au, for example. So you could talk about particular accounting standards and talk about particular legislation reforms in various years, but how do you drill that down into something that people actually want to know? So an award entry was particularly interesting for that because you had to make it persuasive and compelling, but the people judging it would be educators. So you had to learn very quickly how to, one, understand the jargon of pedagogical excellence and teaching for creativity and empathy and concepts like third teacher and things, which have got a lot of integrity behind them, but they can be a bit complex to talk about. How do you say that they're really great things without losing the integrity of what you're talking about while still making it persuasive? Because as soon as you write something that has a minor technical glitch in it, so for example, if I talked about a particular aspect of one part of the pedagogy using the wrong word at the wrong time, that would lose me credibility amongst the teaching staff here. But if you go too over detailed, that loses me the ability to be persuasive in the award entry or any kind of persuasive messaging that you might be working on for a speech or something else like that.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That's, I think, you've got to learn to translate, and it's a really interesting skill to try and develop. Interestingly, early in my career, I went on it was just after Barack Obama got elected, and I got sent on a great writing course. It was Learn to Write Like Obama. And you learned things like the cadence and the rhythm and the patterns he used in his speeches and his writing.
Great.
And how you could replicate that in your own work. So a really good writing course is something that I can heartily recommend, that not just for award entries, but for all parts of anything to do with copywriting or reporting.
Yeah. Whereabouts did you do that course?
That was down in Sydney. I'm not sure if the company that runs it still exists, but it's still on my shelf. I had a massive clean out of my office the other day. But one of the main things that I still have is that. And so how to draw on the power of using threes, for example, and alliteration and cadence and rhythm, stuff that you don't often think about outside of music. But how can you incorporate it into a short scale of writing or a speech or an award entry? It can make it quite beautiful. Like a really powerful metaphor or allegory can really illuminate a story far more than just giving a definition. So,
I love that.
Which I'm trying to do in this podcast a little bit, always trying to say it's like this or it's like that. That can be quite helpful.
Well, I think that's really important. And I think, marketers are all communicators at the end of the day, and we're all trying to distill a message in some way to different audiences. And I actually think this, the copywriting side of things is something that, we all need to be keeping top of mind. And it's something that, some marketers aren't particularly good at yet or
Yeah,
don't like
it's something
doing?
that's being affected as well. And you're noticing it not just in kids, but certainly in grads. So at the last interview I ran for a junior level role,
Mm-hmm.
it was amazing the poor writing that you
Mm,
could see. And a large part of this job would be, writing media releases or marketing reports. They'd be handling the school's annual report, or they'd need to report to me on certain
yeah.
things. And the grammar, the spelling, the style is just, and these weren't, uneducated people.
No.
But I think it's getting worse the more time we spend staring at a screen or writing in Twitter language.
Yeah,
We've
that's right.
forgotten how we're fast losing the ability to tell a really good and compelling story
Yeah.
that people want to keep paying attention to. We're great at giving the soundbite or the 30-second grab, but can you get people to listen and then keep listening, or
Yep.
read and then keep reading?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very important skill.
And it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves. I caught my 10-year-old doing his homework yesterday by dictating the answers to the computer to type. And
It's innovative. It's innovative.
Yeah, he was like, wow, this is so much quicker if I don't actually have to type it myself. And I was like,
at least he was doing his homework. That's a start.
Well, I was like, A, I want you to learn how to type. And B, there's no grammar in that. You're not actually learning. It's actually a spelling exercise. So you're really not learning anything around what you're meant to be doing. But I can see then, where this is going to be something that people do have to focus on if they want to be good at it.
Yeah, that's right. And it's being disciplined within your own self too about where you spend your professional development time. Like, it's very easy to get caught reading the same blog every day, listening to the same thing every week, just immersing yourself in a particular sector. And that's why it was something I spoke about when I spoke at Interactive Minds is what are you reading, not just outside your comfort zone, but outside your specific sector. So I use the example early and what marketing can learn from Greek mythology.
Yes.
But what other things are you reading from a sector or a style that has nothing to do with your day-to-day job? So the startup sector, I think it can get a bit sort of caught just reading its own press, for example, very much so. And marketers, we can do the same. We just read marketing blogs, read product analysis, all sorts of different things. When was the last time that you read a story of fantasy or science fiction or something? It doesn't have to be those, obviously, but something else that's
Something
right
different.
outside your comfort zone that can provoke your brain to think in a different way. That's why at school you learn so many different subjects. Imagine if you specialize too early. But once you start specializing, that doesn't mean you just stay in that space. Otherwise, you become very one-dimensional.
Yeah. What are you reading at the moment or exposing yourself to learn something a bit different?
Well, this is perhaps a little bit niche, but because of my local church involvement, I'm reading a bit of stuff on Christian apologetics. So that's answers to difficult questions. So do science and faith conflict and how you can give answers for that?
Yep.
So that's one. But the other is a book that my boss lent me. It's called The 5 Temptations of a CEO. So it's on leadership of people and what the biggest challenges leaders face and how that can, how you can take meaning from that and how it helps you have better conversations. And the book I read just before that was just called Fierce Conversations.
Okay.
So it's how you can have more meaningful conversations in every level of life, because how you move away from small talk and actually have conversations that have meaning and have value at all levels of life, whether it's at home with your spouse or with your kids or with your work colleagues or with clients or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
so,
nice.
Yeah, I try to keep my circle of influence as broad as I can. But
yeah,
it doesn't always work.
It sounds like you're doing a pretty good job of it. Now, I do just want to circle back to the awards conversation just to finish that off before we wrap up today. Now, 2 main questions. The first one, if someone is out there looking to take some advice from you today and explore some awards that they might be able to enter, do you have any advice to them on where to start or tips on, how to get started and make it work?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I'd recommend you don't just listen to me, but you listen to other people who might know a bit more than what I'm talking about. The second is to really know not just what your brand is, but what do you want to be? What do you want to be known for? If you could, so there's the exercise we used to have when we were writing proposals for new business at the public relations firm was, imagine the front page of, in this case, it was the Sydney Morning Herald or the Australian Financial Review, and there was a profile article of your company. What would you want the headline to be? So what do you want the headline to be of your organization or the client whom you're representing? And for some, it might be innovation. Some, it might be things around community engagement. Others might want it to be technologically sound, next generation technology. And then try and find awards that can recognize in those specific sectors. So you might be a property firm. That doesn't mean you enter property awards. Or you might be, a digital marketing agency. It doesn't mean you should necessarily enter a digital marketing award. Maybe one of the companies that you're doing work for is what could it be? A law firm. So maybe you want to enter something to do with law awards. That's the best way to reach more people in that market and build credibility in that sector. Or do you want to be known for, we have incredible corporate social responsibility. So what are the best CSR awards out there that you could go into? And it may not have anything to do with your core service offering, but if it's where your brand wants to be, it's kind of that Simon Sinek thing. They don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so why are you an organization? What you do is you do digital marketing strategy, but why do you do it? Because you want to make the world a better place. Because you want to help people change, the course of human history in this particular sector of the economy.
I love it.
So that's probably the best place to go, is look for awards in what you want to be known for. Not what you're even currently known for, but what do you want to be known for?
Yeah.
And for people who are perhaps middle management, they're not the ones deciding on the marketing strategy, use this as a chance to potentially influence the marketing strategy. This is a great way to influence up the organization. If you could find, I think we should be known in this, and here's why, because this is where the market is heading. I tell you what, you're going to make a lot better case for your career advancement if you can have a conversation like that, rather than just saying, hey, that job you asked me for, I've already done it.
Yeah.
That's great. That shows you can do your current job. You want to show that you're better than what you currently are.
Yeah.
So how can you use that to not only build the company's brand, but build your own brand as well?
Awesome. I love what you just said around what do you want to be known for, and also then extending that to other industries and how you can get exposure in other industries. Because after all, if you enter an award in your own industry, yes, you're going to get recognition in that industry, but often we want to extend beyond that. And that's a really great point to find something that aligns, that might
Otherwise,
give you a new audience.
Preaching to the choir. And who are you up for? I'll keep coming back to a digital marketing firm. If you win in best digital marketing firm, chances are most people that will hear about that are just other digital marketing
firms.
Right.
So,
all they'll do is tick them off, and they want to beat you more next time.
Yes. And I love what you said earlier as well around, I suppose, the nature of awards being something that you might not necessarily want to enter the same award multiple years in a row, especially after you've won it. But maybe it's more of an evolution where you then move your focus to the next step. And the next area. And I think that's really interesting as well. So you said that fairly early on in our chat. Now that we've kind of talked about awards a lot more since then, you mentioned that now that you've won some awards for best school or best junior school, you might be looking to other areas to see whether you can win awards in other topics, I suppose, or for other things.
Yeah, for sure. So, for example, the brand that we've really built here at St. Paul's is around innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. So we were the first school in the country to run, I guess, a Shark Tank the first night.
Cool.
But we were also the first school to take it to the next level. A lot of schools now will have their pitch nights, but we've got an on-site startup precinct here where accountants, marketers, lawyers, business advisors, public speaking experts are all on tap to help you get to actually go to market and generate a return. So we've sort of challenged the notion of why is it only successful education if a student gets to year 12 and then goes to university? What if by the time they reach the end of year 11, they've already, exited a company and had a turnover of $100,000? It's possible. Cool. Why aren't we helping to enable that? Most students who start their own company are doing it in spite of their schooling, not enabled by their schooling.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I guess that's where we're probably looking to go, is that can we win an innovation award in a amongst probably companies with a lot of more traditional credibility in that space? Could a school come over and say, we're one of the most innovative organizations in Australia and we've demonstrated it via this? Or could we enter a startup award? Could a student here win something in that? So, for example, we had students the other night out at the precinct here in Brisbane, which is a startup precinct, pitching a new business to the chief entrepreneur, who was so keen that they've actually connected them with investors now. So, and these are kids in year 9. I mean, it's crazy.
Great.
So we need to keep looking for awards that enhance that brand, because that's our point of difference to the competition. We can't just keep winning School of the Year, mainly because I don't think we'd win it again. They'd probably share it around.
Well, that's right.
We've probably got more to lose.
Yeah,
it again.
Yeah,
so
I'm sure
what's going to enhance our brand is one of the most innovative, not just schools, but organisations in the country, and what's going to enhance that brand message.
Fantastic. And it sounds like a perfect positioning to me. Who doesn't want their kids to be going to a school that's innovative?
I hope so.
Pushing them in these directions.
That's the idea. I'll tell you in a few years if it's working.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be watching the Innovation Awards. Very interesting over the next year. That's right. We'll keep an eye on it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we head off, I want to ask you, how do you manage your time? I'm sure you have a lot of different priorities going on. Do you have any tips or hacks that you use to make sure that you're on top of your workload and that you're prioritising effectively?
Yeah, I can give 2 things. One, I'm not amazing at email. Like, my inbox is out of control. I've read everything in there, but I'm really poor at organising things. But I'll give you one hack that I've found has worked really, really well for me, especially for people are sort of creative types and they often get new ideas. So find a whiteboard or a part of your desk or a part of your office or something and write parking lot at the top. So as soon as you get an interesting idea about something, it goes in the parking lot.
Yep.
That way you're giving yourself permission to come back to it later, and you're not going to get upset that you haven't forgotten it, but you're not going to spend time unpacking every aspect of it now when there's perhaps other things that you should be getting on with.
Nice.
That's a really good thing. And then carve out, make a decision for your week. So, for example, I've decided that 10% of my week, at least, is devoted to pure strategy dreaming. So every Wednesday from 8 a.m. till midday, I'll probably not be in the office. I'll go work at a coffee shop or somewhere off site. And that's my parking lot revisit time. That's when I start thinking, what could life be? What could the world be? What could this school, this organization be? Now, you got to have some integrity measures associated with it, because you can't, otherwise you'll just go off and have a lot of coffee. So work with your boss on keeping you accountable for how you use that time, so that you can always come back and show, here's why this is proving beneficial, because it's allowing me to get into the parking lot and turn these ideas. And, really interesting stuff comes out of my parking lot time. It doesn't always. There's some days where it's not happening for me.
Yep.
But that is a way to making sure that you give yourself time to dream while not compromising other things that you should be working on. So get a parking lot and get outside.
Awesome. I love that. I think it's really important as well what you've done in terms of allocating a time during the week that you stick to, because otherwise you can put stuff in your calendar and it can get changed or get pushed out. But if you've kind of made a commitment to do it on that day, that's, I think, the best way to actually make sure it happens. Especially if you're off-site.
Then no one can interrupt that time anyway.
Yeah, it can't be stolen.
If I'm here, I'm surprised no one's knocked on my door during this teleconference, actually. Actually, classes are all going. It'll get 5 minutes and I'll go crazy.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you again for joining us. We have got so many awesome tips from you today around awards, around prioritization, around credibility, around so much stuff. So thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
My pleasure, and good luck to all your listeners, and thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Oh, one last question, Dylan. If people want to find you, what's the best channel or way to get in touch?
Probably LinkedIn. If you find me on Twitter, it'll be nothing but Canberra Raiders posts. I'm still bitter about Sunday.
Okay, LinkedIn.
Yeah, connect to me on LinkedIn. I'd
Perfect.
love to stay in touch.
Okay. Thanks again, Dylan. Great to have you on the show.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please subscribe so that next week's podcast episode will go straight into your playlist. My recommended action item from today's show is to think about what your organisation wants to be known for and try and find an award in that area to consider entering. Come and check out the free Interactive Minds Facebook group and be supported by hundreds of marketers. Just search for Interactive Minds on Facebook. You can access today's show notes at interactiveminds.com/podcast. See you next week.